to slay the many-headed monster that is this wild Bergdahl case, you have the man at the middle of the mystery, Bowe Bergdahl. You have an angry set of lawmakers who feel thwarted and snubbed at the president's rogue prisoner swap. And now you have all these questions about what to do with Guantanamo. We've been trying to figure it out. Has the president lost his mind? Has he totally given up? Or has he surrounded himself with incompetent people who have no idea how to practically navigate the waters in Washington? The president is sinking, all while being devoured by the beasts of his own creation, as every new day brings a worsening scandal. Bummer for you, buddy. So how much worse can it get? And can you put the toothpaste back in the tube? We'll discuss all of that and so much more in detail on this sassy beast known as the Independents. It's the Hydra that won't go away. Hi there and welcome to the show. It is Hump Day. I am Kennedy, your hostess, along with Reason Magazine editor-in-chief Matt Welch and Camille Foster from Free Think Media. Together we are frinkin' thinking. We are the Independents. Hi. Another day. Another scandal, more head-scratching, and very few people coming to the president's defense. There are so many parts of the story competing for group outrage, and a lot of folks are hanging on to half facts. But we know this. Bergdahl is back in U.S. custody, the Taliban gets a new basketball team, and the president is playing defense. A new 17-minute video just surfaced showing the Bergdahl transfer, and the guy looks awfully blinky. What's he doing there? Taliban freakers were laughing as they told him not to come back. He wouldn't make it out alive next time. Was Bergdahl sad to be leaving this brutal band of brothers? We have put together an impressive and curious party panel. We've got Buck Sexton in the house. He's a former CIA operative and the national security editor for The Blaze. And Charles Cooke is a talented and thoughtful writer for the National Review. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Hello.
It's Bowe Bergdahl. So what are we learning as this whole crazy scandal unfolds? I'm actually going to go to you first, Buck Sexton.
Well, on the administration side of things, it gets worse for them every day. There's no way that you can justify the decision that they made to hold him up as a hero based upon the fact that not only are we finding out a lot of very disturbing and unsavory things about Bergdahl when he walked off. There's some who are even saying that he tried to contact the Taliban.
Did you know he was a deserter before they found him?
The government knew he was a deserter before they found him, and that's what actually really matters here. I had actually heard from within the military and intel community before this Bergdahl thing. It's a little sketchy. They were keeping it hush-hush for a while, and now that this has all come out, the administration wants to pretend like they didn't know this. And by the way, it's gotten so bad for them that they're calling those who served with him essentially liars. They're saying now that this has all been concocted, that there are these right-wing strategists out there who are getting together all the military members. They are digging the hole for themselves even deeper with this administration every day.
Theme. So if someone comes out with unsavory news about the administration, all of a sudden they're horrible, incompetent people like Edward Snowden was a high school dropout and a low-level analyst.
Yeah, and this is happening often through the mouthpieces of sort of unnamed White House officials who brought up the phrase swift boat earlier today to Chuck Todd to describe what they perceive as Republicans or critics saying about Bowe Bergdahl and his father. That's a sideshow to all of this right now, as far as I can tell. Well, the question I have for Buck, though, and people like us who've been criticizing all this, okay, if he is a deserter, let's say that he was, we still get him, don't we?
We still have to try to get him, but we can also discuss what the price was for getting him, and now, of course, what we would do with him. What's inexcusable, and I don't think anybody who's trying to approach this in a fair and rational manner would say it's excusable at this point, is for the administration to come out and immediately, given what they knew beforehand, act like he's a hero. President Obama was just shy of handing over a medal to his parents in the Rose Garden. That's not the kind of stuff you should be doing when somebody has not only walked off of their base, which now they're saying there are competing narratives. The only competing narrative comes from the administration. Everyone who served with him said he walked off. On top of that, there's the possibility of a dishonorable discharge and maybe even prison time attached to what he did when he was in captivity. So this is a very serious thing that we're looking at.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Charles, I have yet to find someone who served with him who said, no, he was a great guy. He was totally heroic. He loved his job, loved his country, and served just like the rest of us.
Well, I've been watching this from the beginning, and it's been quite amusing, because you can't criticize anything about it, otherwise you're part of some right-wing conspiracy. Now, obviously, I am part of a right-wing conspiracy.
Me too.
But,
me too.
But Jake Tapper is not part of a right-wing conspiracy. You know, before he was at CNN, he was, I think, writing for Salon, but people have said, but he sometimes goes on conservative outlets and talks about his book. So
yeah,
that
Charlie Savage of the New York Times,
so,
last I look, is not part of the right-wing conspiracy.
Right, so he interviewed a soldier, and the soldier said, well, I'm not sure this guy is that great. I'm not sure he's on the level. And they said, no, that's just one source. And then they had 6 6 more. So that's just the 6 soldiers who served.
I mean, not to mention all the guys on Facebook who are ripping up their NDAs, doing whatever they can. And by the way, I know Facebook isn't a source. Believe me, I know there are a lot of half-truths out there. And there is also a lot of emotion. But, you know, the point is the picture that is being pieced together so far, it's not so rosy for this guy.
But there's plenty of dubious stuff out there. I mean, I heard you reference earlier that he might have actually been providing the Taliban with information, that there are stories that he was reaching out to the Taliban. We don't know any of that.
That's an allegation.
Right, it's an allegation.
But it's being made by those who served with him.
I don't care. Doesn't matter. It's still an allegation.
I said it's an allegation.
Let me just correct that quickly. It's different if I say it or if Buck says it. It's a little flimsy. If a guy who was listening on the radio, who swore an oath,
maybe so.
and knew him,
maybe so,
and was there and was privy to those facts, his allegation holds a little more weight.
is looking into this. Let them do their investigation and find out. I'm not sure. I don't actually need to speculate on this. As I said, I think there are some legitimate issues that we can be concerned about here. I don't know that it's whether or not we should have given these guys up. At some point, these guys were going to have to leave Guantanamo, along with the many other people that are there. Right. I know we'll get into some of that other stuff.
The administration at one point said that they had marked them for indefinite detention, though. They said, look, we don't think we're ever necessarily going to be giving these guys up.
They've been talking about that for most of these guys for a very long time.
It's a big propaganda victory for the Taliban. We can see that with the video they've created now. They're sending this around everywhere. It also, by the way, is part of a narrative. The entire imagery that you saw is the U.S. pulling out of the conflict. It's not just us taking our guy and going. It's going to be, see them, they have to leave. We're in charge here. So it's damaging to the war effort.
You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You're not going to get these 5 guys back. I don't know why we're squawking about it.
Because it's a fascinating story and it's a mystery.
No, but the future of other prisoner releases, that has yet to be determined. Okay, my question for you, Charlie, is did the administration see any of this coming when the president had that big Rose Garden ceremony with the bearded one?
No, and that's why I think we're all talking about it, is that this seems to have been incompetence. And the left cannot admit that the president might be incompetent. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of misinformation going around. It's very difficult to work out what's true and what's not. But on a reasonable day, you would look at 6 soldiers saying what they know about their platoon mate. You would look at, villagers in the town nearby with the Washington Post this afternoon, and you would say, okay, well, there might be something here. But no, it's all a Richard Grenell-led, Fox-led right-wing conspiracy, and they won't accept anything.
That's evidence of something. But I'll tell you what's more disconcerting to me, the obtuse military objectives of this war effort, which is apparently being jeopardized now by negotiating with the Taliban. I don't get it. What on earth are we still trying to do there? What have we been trying to do there since the president took office? And what will we accomplish in the next 24 odd months? Buck Sexton.
I've tried to be very consistent on this whenever it comes up. The president decided to look tough on Afghanistan, which meant doubling down, sending more soldiers, surging, after waiting a year, by the way, to figure out what was going on in Afghanistan.
With the encouragement of conservatives.
But you either go or don't go. You either say, we are drawing down the second I get into office because this can't be done, or you say, we are staying until this thing is finished. What the president has said is after spending more lives, more treasure there, we're sort of going to do this just in time for me to ride the Victory Express out of office.
I think we all agree with that, more or less, and if Charlie died, I don't really care.
Be nice.
But he's British. Isn't part of that thing, we all want to say either, win or go home, be there or don't be there, but the political reality is that American presidents can't just pull everyone up and send them home overnight. When's the last time that happened? 1975 in Saigon? Is that an image that everyone wants to get back?
But I mean, that's the image that is being created right now by some Obama critics. It looks like 1975. It looks like you're repeating history.
I'm not defending him, but just thinking out loud here. If he pulled everyone, if there was no 9,800 troops there anymore, wouldn't everyone say exactly that? Is this maybe the closest he can come to getting everyone home?
There would be critics, of course, right? There's opposition to President Obama no matter what he does. That exists, but at least he would have consistency. At least he would have a moral consistency with, we're fighting a war, I want to complete what the goal is. And by the way, what is the goal for this war? Something the Obama administration has not particularly articulated, a self-sustaining democracy that can defend itself. Good luck with that. As long as the Taliban can exist in Pakistan,
under the last
that's not going to... The goal was actually to defeat al-Qaeda and drive them out of Afghanistan, which was accomplished very quickly under Bush, and they should have just left good enough alone. Yes, that is the problem.
So there it is. So
there it is.
I mean, but that's why Afghanistan is unpopular, and it's looking more and more like Vietnam every day, because you're going to go go on essentially your third administration with this.
We have only to look at Iraq, which is a total mess at this point, reaching new highs all the time in terms of casualty numbers right now, today.
Right.
Yeah, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. I mean, it's all an absolute disaster. Good job, Obama doctrine. Well, we'll tackle Gitmo a little later in the show with these gentlemen. And John Stossel is going to be stopping by very shortly to talk about his show for tomorrow night. We've got big primary results from yesterday. We will cherry pick what is in your best interest, and we'll do it next. Stay with us. Hog castration, rather. It's the new black. How did one saucy Iowan ride her Harley and her neutering credentials all the way to the Republican Senate nomination? And is Jerry Brown beatable? Please. Well, let's look at primary results with Chris Moody. He's a political reporter for Yahoo News. Welcome back to the Independence, Chris.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about Joni Ernst and some of the other big takeaways from primary night.
Well, one of the big narratives of this election has been the Tea Party uprising against the so-called establishment. And there's one candidate, Joni Ernst, who has seemed to be able to straddle that line between both groups, having support from guys like Marco Rubio and Mitt Romney at the same time. She's been able to garner support from both the grassroots Tea Party and the NRSC, the establishment here in Washington. It's kind of fascinating to watch, especially if you compare it to Thad Cochran in Mississippi, who seemed to be absolutely blindsided last night when his challenger, Chris McDaniels, rode into Mississippi with $8 million of outside money and really put him into a position he hasn't been in years.
And this has been a nasty, brutal, mudslinging race between the two. All sorts of tawdry allegations. So who's going to claim victory, do you think, in Mississippi?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but one thing I can ask is, when are these old incumbents going to learn? It appears as though Thad Cochran went into this just expecting to win. Now, they'll never say that, of course, but he just absolutely seems blindsided by all of this, and now he has to run into a primary. This guy has been in office for decades now, and one of the ironies of this whole thing is that he was one of the few Republicans who joined with Senator McCain about a decade or so ago to impose campaign finance restrictions on elections that would have blocked a lot of the money that is now coming in post Citizens United, post McCutcheon, these Supreme Court cases that are coming in to wipe him out. So we have a bloody battle. I mean, we've got people sneaking into his wife's nursing home and taking pictures. It is a nasty election.
Yeah,
if there ever
they're
were
trying
one.
to pin that on his rival, actually.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Chris, sorry. In these races, it's always important to distinguish whether they're running against each other on policy or on comportment, this Tea Party versus establishment things, whereas Ted Cruz is kind of a comportment person, Rand Paul is more policy. So what was it like in Mississippi? What were the issues?
Well, again, as we talked about last time I was on the show, it is a difference between policy and strategy. And McDaniels is the kind of guy who is more of the I will not negotiate. And Thad Cochran is an old school Republican, will do what he needs to do to pass a bill. But he really is out of touch with the 2014 Republican Party. He said in an interview recently that he really doesn't know much about the Tea Party. I mean, that's just something that your handlers will tell you, at least give you the Wikipedia version of what the Tea Party is. And for him to say something like that really makes him seem out of step, especially as the Republicans have moved further rightward, and it's been harder to distinguish between a so-called Tea Party platform and a Republican platform.
I wanted to ask you about California. Neil Kashkari bested Tim Donnelly, and Tim Donnelly's been a very colorful kind of anti-immigration character in California, and he did not get the nomination to go up against Jerry Brown. Tell me about Kashkari.
Well, in California, with immigration, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, it's a tough position to be in, especially if you oppose immigration reform. There's a lot of polls showing that although Hispanics don't vote as immigration being the top issue, they do look at your view on that stance, on that position, and determine whether or not they'll listen to you on other issues, especially if you're demonizing immigrants. A lot of people have cousins, friends, aunts, and uncles that might be undocumented immigrants, and and for somebody to be against immigration reform in California is very risky. I wouldn't expect them to go very far, especially in a statewide election.
So, Moody, as we wrap up here, could you give me a sense of the long view? What does all of this mean for who will ultimately control the House and the Senate? What is the aggregate effect of all of the scandals that we've seen in the news recently?
Well, Republican establishment types here in Washington are really worried that guys like Chris McDaniels, whether he's in Mississippi or another guy like him around the country, can lose them the election in November. The Republicans sense blood here. They know that they have a chance to take back the Senate, which will be huge for them, and they're worried that a guy like Chris McDaniels will ruin it for them. Now, on the other side, I think a big takeaway is that incumbent Republicans need to get with the program and realize how the world has changed a little bit and be a little bit more aware of who's challenging them and that they might actually have to face a tough election. It's not the Republican Party of the 90s anymore. These outside groups have a lot of money, and they're willing to use it against even long-standing Republicans.
Yep, there's a lot riding on these midterm elections, and they are going to get dirty, which is why we need your clean insight. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you.
What happens when a crazy old lady gets her hands on too much THC? Good thing Maureen Dowd decided to play guinea pig in Colorado. A dramatic reading from her bad trip down Mary Jane Lane. Next.
I sacrificed to make laughter. I kept nothing for myself. Now you won't leave me, baby, for the love of someone else. Stars can front.
Welcome back to The Independent. The New York Times has no shortage of reporters willing to make fools of themselves by revealing embarrassing pot stories. First, David Brooks shed light on his clumsy high school weed dabblings, and now Maureen Dowd. She tries to put the rad in Colorado by gorging on edibles from a Denver pot shop. Her trip went a little something like this. I felt a scary shudder go through my body and brain. I barely made it from the desk to the bed, where I lay curled up in a hallucinatory state for the next 8 hours. I was thirsty but couldn't move to get water or even turn on the lights. I was panting and paranoid, sure that when the room service waiter knocked and I didn't answer, he called the police and had me arrested for being unable to handle my candy. Oh, Maureen, so drugs should be illegal because Maureen Dowd can't handle her yummies.
She didn't exactly say that drugs should be illegal, we should point out. It's more like, let's go to Colorado now that weed is legal and let's do that thing. Of course, she did that thing that nobody smart ever would do, is eat the whole bar, for crying out. If you actually read the labels on bars, and they have labels now, which they didn't in the black market for pot. You just had some guy roll up with brownies, and good luck trying to figure that out. And that would always end up bad. You know, everyone's giving her a hard time for this column, for the writing. I found it to be almost an exact reportorial account of basically every time I've been stoned in my life. So I think she's spot on here. The point being that we shouldn't base, one person's bad trip or use of drugs badly.
Okay.
If you had 8 servings of vodka and you were a lightweight and wrote about it, it would be pretty ugly. You'd be vomiting on your shoes.
If you had 8 shots of Patron, if I did, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be vomiting in Camille's bucket.
You'd be in the ER, actually.
I think
I probably
9 gallons
would.
of
But
ice
why
cream
would
might
you
mess up,
trip
too.
alone in your hotel room in the dark? She did so many things wrong here. And the other thing she did wrong that I hold her accountable for this is she took a little bit, didn't wait long enough, and it didn't work. So she took some more and then ate the whole candy bar.
That's classic.
That is the dumb Olympics,
that is,
and she gets a gold medal.
That's what you do when you're 19, or in her case,
75.
50.
I think if
And
our
she was wearing
friend,
green cords.
if our friend Carl Hart was here, he might talk to us about the dangers of myth making when it comes to drugs. Folks don't actually know what they ought to be doing and what they ought not be doing. Taking edibles this way, they take a long time to hit you, so you don't take a lot of them when you don't sort of feel the consequences and the side effects. I do think Matt has already pointed out, but it's worth highlighting that the incentives for the people who are selling these edibles are pretty clear. They don't want to make you sick. They want you to have a pleasurable experience when you buy their products, so you'll come back and get more. I suspect that if these products didn't have the label, she said she wasn't warned at the store, although she did learn about it the next day, that it'll be clearly marked on the package.
By the way, that's bad journalism.
Folks will find out.
That's bad journalism. She did not vet the product. She did not do her investigation.
research.
And I'm kind of ashamed.
She binge ate pot. Nick Gillespie, a colleague at Reason, has a good point about this, that this is all actually part of the market discovery process here.
That's right.
And in fact, that's normal. That's what happens when we're going to get rid of prohibition, start legalizing things. People are going to engage in kinds of trials and error. And it's actually helpful to have people write about it and explain it. I mean, you know, if someone reads this and realizes that they shouldn't eat an entire candy bar full of pot, that's not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing in the world, in my mind, is that they read that and come to the inaccurate conclusion that having that thing legally available is worse than having a black market when all kinds of worse things are available. With
I mean, you have to take a little responsibility, and part of that is a learning process. Maureen, shame on you, sister. Come on now. The Vatican has some unkind words for libertarians. We're going to discuss a little theological nugget later on. And next, how one singer made Indians very unhappy, and the scariest axe-wielding Dutch clowns this side of Utrecht. Topical Storm is next. All right, let us dip you in stories and drizzle you with absurdity. Welcome to the Topical Storm. Topic number 1. Remember Pharrell? He's that guy in the big Smokey the Bear hat who sings that catchy song Happy from Despicable Me Too. Well, he inspired the hashtag not happy from some Native Americans who are very displeased. He wore an Indian headdress on the cover of British Elle magazine. He is obviously racist and wants to trivialize obsessed peoples with his blatant insensitivity. Why not just give them smallpox and take their land while you're at it, Pharrell? The only thing that would have made this story worse is if he were wearing a Hitler mustache while eating a live baby.
Well, he'd kind of wore something like a headdress before on the album cover for Nothing, which is not a great album. Hypnotize You is pretty good. I didn't love the rest of it. But this is stupid. I mean, it's all of the cultural appropriation freakers. And I'm not even certain most of those folks are actually Native Americans. I don't get the sense that those are the people that are outraged that he happened to wear a headdress. And look, I mean, it's a helmet, but there are feathers. I mean, one might think it was a headdress. I actually thought it was a headdress.
If we have to
Until I looked
stop
really
the
closely.
Indian headdresses, that means we have to airbrush the entire 1970s. Just what do we do with the Village People records?
Young men.
You can only wear it if you really, really, really mean it. Only if you mean it.
That's right. Intention. It's 3/4 of the law. Topic number 2. What's worse, being on death row or being deprived of sweet, naked lovin' while you're locked up? One man had a choice between the two as he broke out of his death row cell and waltzed off to possible freedom. Convicted killer Norris Speed, yes, that is his real name, he encountered lady inmate Jasmine Jones, also her real name, and as he stood at the crossroads between sweet freedom and even sweeter lovin', what did he choose? He sized up Jasmine Jones and her lady lumps, convinced her to go back to his cell, and they tried to get it on when they were rudely interrupted by a guard who realized Jones was missing. Oh, she found the bratwurst. But it could be the worst decision the two jailbirds have made, because in Norris Speed's words, he didn't get to do anything. God, he's not free, he's locked up.
Everything about the story is sad face making to me, but especially that he didn't get to do anything. You make the choice, you go for it, and then the guard interrupts.
You're so excited, but he could have just walked out of there, but no, he's like, oh, Jasmine, hello. If they're going to find me, I hope they find me with you. Topic number 3. What did Dutch people do when when they get bored? It's the
Trigger warning!
It's the same thing as their American counterparts, only they do it in clown makeup. 3 Dutch men were sentenced to community service after one of them dressed as a clown and jumped out of the bushes holding an axe and chased a screaming woman on her bicycle. The other 2 were popped for filming the prank and putting it on YouTube. They did target other cyclists who weren't as scared. They just rode by and told the guy to stop being such a clown.
You know,
Stop being such a clown.
Community
Why
service.
Why are you doing this? This is
community
Holland.
service, really?
Yeah.
If ever we're going to have mandatory minimums on this planet, it really should be clowns, Dutch clowns jumping out of trees with axes.
They're just practical jokers.
5 to 10. 5 to 10.
Probably wasn't even a real axe. It was
Did you
a
see
clown
that? Look at that
axe.
picture.
Yeah, I know. That's terrifying.
But didn't you do stuff
That's
like
scary.
that
Clowns
when
are
you were
bad.
young?
I did not jump out of trees in clown face with axes.
We used to make dummies, like really convincing dummies. We would stuff clothes and then we would throw them on top of cars as they drove by.
No, not really. Not really.
What's wrong with you?
We were young. We were much younger than 18,
That is
and we were
terrible.
very bored, and it was a different time. It was the 1980s, and Ronald Reagan was president, so that makes it okay.
Yeah.
Topic number 4.
Gotcha. Same thing.
Topic number 4, social media has made it very hard and busy for Secret Service agents with people screwing around online. It's hard to know when someone is really threatening the president's life. So what is a frustrated agency to do? Seek out software that can detect sarcasm. The department wants to create its own system for monitoring Twitter. Right now they're using FEMA's analytics, and you know how ineffective they are. It's great news for civil libertarians. You have a brand new set of eyes watching you. Can you detect that sarcasm, boys?
I think this is a really great idea, and I can't see anything that could go wrong with it.
Sarcasm.
Since Matt tells me all the time that I'm very good at sarcasm, I'm not going to deploy any. This is
Can't even take a
I'm not
sarcasm
gonna do it.
set right above the net.
yeah, no,
Outrage.
nope.
How dare you? Round 2 with our panel, Gitmo and the Pope. And we'll look at the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen Square in just a little while. It's only happening right now.
No sympathy, 'cause it's meant to be the truth, and nothing but the truth. I tell it to the youth, propelling with the proof in the brain. Wouldn't you like to know? Oh, no, you can't.
New federal standards will fix education.
As teachers, we're on the front lines, and we support Common Core.
And income inequality is destroying America.
I believe this is the defining challenge of our time.
And the New York Times is not liberal.
The news pages are not ideological.
Popular nonsense.
I love it, delivered in a way that only Stossel can. Common sense can often be so nonsensical. Video games causing violence, internships are exploitive. The rich only get rich on the backs of the poor. Of course, when an idea gets entrenched in public opinion, it's tough to convince people that the prevailing wisdom is just nonsense. John Stossel is the host of Stossel, seen here on Thursday nights at 9 Eastern on Fox Business Network. He has a new show this week called Popular Nonsense. So let's talk about Common Core. The idea is to set federal standards for what kids learn in school. And I'm going to do a John Stossel. So what's the problem with that?
And actually, this one has more reason behind it. They can say we need a national test so we can tell who's learning, who isn't. States game the system. But since when has central planning done anything very well?
Especially when it comes to education, which is very personal.
Already in bad shape from state central planning. At least with states, you have some experimentation. Plus, they claim this was voluntary, and it's voluntary only in the sense that you had the option of not doing it and then losing tons of money. They offered a $1 billion bribe to take it.
Yeah, no, it's federal money, and even on the individual level, parents can't opt out of Common Core. And, you know, now, according to some liberal media organizations, if you have any objection to Common Core, suddenly you're racist.
Really?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. And you can opt out, but you have to homeschool or you have to pay your own private tuition.
Yeah, you can pay $30,000 a student and go to a private school or quit your job and homeschool.
Though, to be fair, Catholic schools, $5,000 to escape the government school. Some schools are $30,000 tuition around
It is
here.
less, but now the Catholic Church isn't too fond of libertarians, so that frightens me.
That's true, too.
Libertarianists.
Yeah. Good.
John, is it really, it's about centralization? Is that the objection here? If it's the New York City public school system, which is big and unwieldy enough, that wants to have the exact same test, are we suddenly saying that that test is much better done because it's local?
Yeah, I wouldn't. And I got to say, Michelle Rhee and Jeb Bush and there are other reformers who I respect who say this will be better. But more centralization just is not the answer
And
to
by the way,
anything.
more testing isn't the answer for learning and education. That's not what learning is about.
This wouldn't necessarily be more testing, and just instead of the state tests,
Yeah.
it would be one test for the country. But there already is this NAEP test if you want to compare across the country.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, you can opt out and send your kid to private school, but at the end of the day, you are still going to pay for those public schools. You're on the hook for that. You don't get a choice. But John, I saw another topic you're going to be talking about are these unpaid internships. I wanted to ask
This is
about
the one that makes my blood boil. I built my career abusing young people like you. No, on interns, many worked for free. And they were eager to do it because they got some work experience. And afterward, many said, oh my God, I learned more in this summer here than I did in 3 years of my college, and I was paying my college lots of money.
And it's a fast track to almost certain employment if you do a good job.
If you do a good job and the employer says, oh, that intern was good. I hired a bunch. Fox has 2 of my interns working here.
Including Jolene Kent.
Jolene Kent.
Was a
right.
Stossel intern. She's now a reporter on Fox Business.
Great report.
I didn't know that.
One of my interns won a Pulitzer Prize.
That was me, actually.
2 then.
I mean, some of my best professional experiences starting out were unpaid internships. I've offered unpaid internships, and what ends up happening here is these internships just disappear, and these kids don't get the opportunity because it's actually an expense for me to have to find stuff for kids to do when they work for me and don't have many skills.
You can't even use the word intern anymore. We had a college associate on our show a few months ago.
Well, right. The rules have been redone. It's always been against the law, apparently, in the Labor Department regulations because it's considered exploitative. But nobody enforced it until Obama. A couple kids sued. Charlie Rose paid $250,000 to settle.
Ouch.
Suddenly, internships are disappearing. And we have college associates who we pay, but far fewer of them. Fewer kids get an opportunity. We get less help. Lose-lose.
And a lot of millennials, they say that internships are exploitive. So have fun on that job market, kids. We'll be watching popular nonsense.
If it's exploitive, then don't take it.
Exactly, John
voluntary.
Stossel. Amen. Just like Bowe Bergdahl in the service. Thanks for being here and shining your light of glory on us.
Wow.
You're a lovely
Light
man.
of glory.
That's right.
You are over the top.
Of course. Thank you, John. You can catch John Stossel. It's Stossel tomorrow night. Popular Nonsense airs in this time slot, 9 Eastern on the Fox Business Network. What has the Pope all rattled today? It's not cat ladies. It's you. Find out what you have done to upset the pontiff next. The president has been promising for 6 years to close Guantanamo Bay. But he's admitted in recent years that's a really tough thing to do. It's an unpopular place, and no one wants to house those filthy inhabitants. So, do you let the Gitmos go? What's a commander-in-chief to do? We've been hearing the same thing since before Obama got elected. Take a look.
Why don't we close Guantanamo and restore the right of habeas corpus? We will close Guantanamo prison, which has damaged our national security interests and become a tremendous recruiting tool for al-Qaeda. With the Afghan war ending, this needs to be the year Congress lifts the remaining restrictions on detainee transfers and we close the prison at Guantanamo Bay.
Congress lift those restrictions. This needs to be the year. Our panel is back, Buck and Charles. So do you think the president anticipated the Bergdahl swap would center on the shady hellhole?
No, I think this has been...
Was he seeing that like, oh, good, this will finally bring up Guantanamo?
No, I think what he thought would happen is people would say, goodness me, you're competent. This is an example of a solid foreign policy and the sort of thing that we want. I think it's been a bit of a disaster. I would say one thing that we've heard a lot that this might push forward a decision, that maybe he can keep doing this and then Guantanamo will be empty. Now, regardless of what you think about Guantanamo, to me that is a completely crazy, unconstitutional way of dodging the issue, right? I mean, you don't give the president these powers to make treaties and to arrange treaties and to arrange prisoner swaps so that he can slowly sort of trickle out the remaining people in Guantanamo Bay.
As a constitutional matter, the president has a lot of leeway
as commander-in-chief.
He does.
The criticism he's been getting about the legality of this is probably the weakest of the legality criticisms that's come out against him. The other ones where he's ignored Obamacare and such, those are big. This one is actually the Constitution possibly on his side.
With the exception of there's a statutory 30-day notification that he violated. Go on,
Which, by the way, neutered Congress. This didn't give Congress any power.
Right.
It was, believe it or not, it took power away from Congress. It was like, I'm going to give you 30 days, but if I don't,
no punishment.
There's two things. The merits of signing statements to one side, I think the president may be right on this one in terms of his Article 2 powers. I think he has the right to make these treaties, the power to make these swaps, rather. But I don't think that you can say because he has the power to make a swap like this, because he acted within his authority, therefore this is how you close Guantanamo, which is an argument that I've seen quite a lot. You know, clearly that's not what that power is there for, right? That's what I'm getting at.
I have a Gitmo theory I haven't heard anywhere else, so I want to throw it out to you guys because I actually really believe it. Not that I don't believe everything I say, and that is that the president's 5-for-1 swap here. Everyone's saying, oh, why would he do that? Well, a major part of the negotiations with the Taliban before this was peace negotiations, actually, trying to deal with what would happen, a ceasefire, and then eventually we would leave. If you're trying to get the Taliban to talk to you, and they have not been willing to talk to us, by the way. They've said, why are we going to talk to you? You're leaving.
I thought they did in 2010 and 2011.
They did, and then they stopped those talks. And if you're Obama and you think that talking is always the way you're going to get forward, whether it's in Iran or it's talking about Ukraine or what have you, if you're trying to sweeten the pot, get the deal going, maybe you give them more than anybody else would because you're trying to create goodwill with the Taliban. 5-for-1. 5-for-1.
Wasn't there, in fact, a quote to that effect from either Joe Biden or Chuck Hagel this week that it was a good faith
trying
effort.
to restart negotiations and talks. They're going to lay off that now, by the way, but they were saying that in the early hours. Like, not only have we done this, the Taliban guys are going to probably talk to us about other stuff, too.
They asked for 13-to-1 and about $1 million before, so that's not the best possible deal they could have drove. They asked for a better deal.
Well, they could have asked for KSM and $100 million, but the point is 5-for-1 given the guys.
There are folks out there who think this was not the most terrible deal in the universe, setting aside the constitutional issues. Like John Billinger, who was the senior associate counsel to President George W. Bush, who happened to suggest that we were probably going to have to let these guys, along with all of the rest of the folks in Guantanamo, 149 detainees, 78 of which have already been cleared. These folks have to go somewhere, and the administration apparently isn't even making a good faith effort to place them someplace else.
These are guys
I don't know that this is a great
maybe I have a place for them that is filled with love and boundaries, and that is Vatican City.
Don't send the terrorists to the Vatican.
They can go to the Vatican. I'll tell you why, because there's a lot of love there. So what is wrong with the world? An advisor to the Pope, Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga, says the problem is libertarians. He said, many of these libertarianists do not read the social doctrine of the church, but they are now trembling before the Book of Piketty. At least it's making them think. To retread communist manifestos make libertarians think about Catholicism, Matt?
Is the Book of Piketty in the New Testament or the Old Testament?
That's definitely New Testament.
I think it's in the Third Testament.
2 weeks ago.
The Book of Krugman.
The secret Third Testament.
The newest Testament.
Yeah, this has been unfortunately a long-standing kind of theme that the Catholic Church has been hitting even before this Pope and the previous Pope and the popes before that. There's been an inherent kind of hostility towards the global capitalist system. This is not their finest foot forward, considering that the global capitalist system that we know it has really only been around since around 1800. The Church has been around a lot longer, and I'll take the record of this one in producing prosperity over the other one.
Right. So this is, I think, what's happened here. I agree with you. I'm always amazed when conservatives and people on the right say, I can't believe the Pope just said that. Why have you not read a history book? There's nothing in Catholic history that would suggest that the Pope and the Vatican is full of Hayeks. And I think what's happened is that because there has been an alliance of anti-communism in the 80s and now on certain social policies, notably abortion, the right has come to believe that the Catholic Church and American libertarianism are the same thing. But that's nonsense. I mean, if anything, Protestantism has often been good for free markets and good toward free markets. But.
Yes, every priest that ever taught, I went to Jesuit school and I'm a Catholic, they always would say that you have to give all you have and follow Christ, and they would have this. This is not new, the rhetoric is not new, and the idea, or the principle rather, you should help the poor. This is why religion and policy don't necessarily always go together in perfect harmony. They're trying to espouse a principle. It's also, though, a little difficult for guys who are huge landowners and have a whole lot of money at their disposal within the infrastructure of the church, then be talking about how everybody needs to be in poverty and helping the poor.
You know what?
I'm a Catholic.
If I were celibate, I'd be cranky too.
That's a point.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you.
Great discussions all around. I loved it. All right, well, it is the 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And what has the world learned about revolt and freedom? We'll go inside the mind of Welch. Where it's Matt next.
Like Mussolini and Kennedy, I'm the cult of personality.
25 years ago today in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, massive pro-democracy demonstrations led by some incredibly brave students were crushed in a massacre perpetrated by the Chinese government. We still don't know the exact number killed. The Chinese say it was 246. Others have estimated almost 3,000. And though it didn't work out for the students, the Tiananmen protests inspired citizens in Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and Romania to topple their own communist dictators that very same year. And our own Matt Welch was living in Eastern Europe not too long after the 1989 revolutions. So, Matt, where's it at?
You know, we were just watching this in the run-up to this, and Camille was looking at that video of the tank man in front of those tanks, and he let out an involuntary wow. That's what it was like at the time. Imagine CNN was just now a thing starting about then. I watched that live when I was 20 on TV, and the world was watching this live to whatever extent they could on TV. And for the first time, we had the sense of like this Cold War thing that was locked in history. It was going to be the guiding parameters of our life forever. Suddenly, that was all up in the air because of this. And you're right, it completely galvanized the dissidents in Central Europe. And that might sound counterintuitive because there was the Tiananmen massacre. But they saw that man, they saw those tanks, and even then they saw the massacre, and they thought to themselves, first of all, any system that supports that is so monstrous that it must be opposed. But second, look at the bravery. Look at the stones on that guy holding up his little plastic sack in front of a row of tanks. And there was Polish solidarity elections this same day, June 4th, 1989. It was the first kind of step towards the democratization that happened then. Within 10 weeks, Hungary opened up the border, letting a lot of East Germans come through Lake Balaton into Austria, and it started coming undone. East Germany wanted to be the next Tiananmen massacre, the rulers there, but Gorbachev went in there partly because he saw the blood that happened there and said, I'm not going to support you.
Can't hold it anymore.
You do this, can't hold it anymore. We're going to withdraw our imperial support. You're on your own. People don't really want to engage in those types of massacres. So it never really worked out totally for the Chinese
So there was
people.
a direct connection between Tiananmen and what happened in Eastern Europe.
Absolutely. You talk to any dissident, they will tell you the exact same thing. It's a global kind of catalyst towards the 1989 revolutions, the best year in our lifetime.
It's fascinating.
And this year, you didn't see massive demonstrations in mainland China. You did see them in Hong Kong, however, which the Chinese took control of very recently, really, from the United Kingdom. Lots of questions about what will ultimately happen to the UK. I'm sorry, about Hong Kong. But this is a pretty good sign that they can go out and publicly demonstrate and commemorate.
To some degree, but if you try and do an internet search for Tiananmen Square in China, you're not going to find much. All right, thank you, gentlemen. And thank you so much for watching tonight. Stossel is going to be in This Time Slot tomorrow night. He's going to have a great show. And Friday, we will be back with an all-new show. It's called The War on Men. Friday at 9 and midnight. For Matt Welch and Camille Foster, I'm Kennedy. Good night.